All right, settle in. Turn the lights down low if you dare. Because tonight, I want to talk about something that happened to me. Something that didn't involve shadows leaping out or voices booming in the dark. It was quieter than that, more insidious. It was about a sound, a tiny, familiar sound, twisted into something deeply wrong in the dead quiet of the night. And it changed the way I feel about silence, about being alone, forever. My name is Clara. A couple of years ago, I found myself living alone for the first time in over a decade. Not by choice, really. Life does that sometimes, throws curveballs that leave you standing in the echoing quiet of a house that used to feel full. My companion through thick and thin, my shadow, my furry little anchor, Jasper, had passed away. He was an old cat, lived a good, long life, but losing him hollowed out a space in my home and in me that felt vast and cold. Jasper wasn't just a cat. He was my cat. Quirky, demanding, affectionate on his own terms. And he had this one specific habit, especially late at night, if I'd accidentally shut my bedroom door completely. Or if he decided, arbitrarily, that he needed immediate attention at 2 a.m. He wouldn't meow, not usually. He'd do this thing, a very distinct, light, rhythmic tap, scratch, tap at the bottom corner of the door. It wasn't frantic, not like a dog wanting out. It was delicate, precise almost. Tap, a single claw extended, just touching the wood. Scratch, a tiny, almost polite drag downward. Tap, another single touch. Pause, tap, scratch, tap. Over and over, this little 3-beat rhythm, just loud enough to penetrate sleep. Impossible to ignore once you knew what it was. Sometimes, if the door wasn't his target, it would be the window pane. The sound slightly different then. More of a tick, scrape, tick, but the rhythm, that was always Jasper. He'd been gone about 3 months. 3 long, quiet months. The grief was still raw, manifesting in unexpected ways. Reaching down to pet phantom fur, catching myself listening for the jingle of his collar that wasn't there anymore. Leaving the bedroom door cracked open out of habit, even though no little cat would be nudging it further. The house felt huge, silent, especially at night. The kind of silence that presses in, magnifying every tiny creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind outside. It was a Tuesday night in late October. Rain lashed against the windows, driven by a gusty wind, the kind of weather that makes you grateful for warmth and shelter, but also enhances every little noise the house makes. I was curled up in bed, reading, trying to lose myself in a story, trying to ignore the empty space on the quilt where Jasper used to knead before settling down. Around midnight, I finally drifted off. I don't know what time it was exactly when the sound first woke me. Sometime in that deep, dark pocket of the night when the world feels utterly still, suspended between yesterday and tomorrow. Maybe 2:30, 3 a.m.? It was faint, barely audible over the drumming rain. Tap, scratch, tap. My eyes snapped open in the darkness. My heart gave a strange little lurch, a mix of hope and confusion, before cold reality crashed back in. Jasper? The name formed in my head before I could stop it, a reflex born of years of responding to that exact sound. But Jasper was gone. Ashes in an urn on the mantelpiece downstairs. It had to be the wind, I told myself sternly. A branch tapping against the window, maybe, or rain hitting the glass in a weird rhythm. I strained my ears, listening past the drumming downpour. Silence. Nothing but the wind and the rain. I must have dreamt it, I decided. Grief does strange things, plays tricks on your senses, summons ghosts out of memory and sound. I rolled over, pulling the covers tighter, trying to recapture sleep, pushing away the hollow ache the phantom sound had momentarily stirred. Sleep didn't come easily after that. I lay there, hyper-aware of the house settling around me, the wind whistling under the eaves. Every creak seemed louder. Every gust of rain against the glass sounded vaguely like tapping. My rational mind insisted it was the storm, amplified by grief and the dead of night. But another part of me, a colder, more primal part, felt a flicker of unease. The sound hadn't just been like Jasper's tapping. It had been exactly like it. The rhythm, the lightness, the specific pause between the sequences. Tap, scratch, tap, pause. Tap, scratch, tap. It didn't happen again that night, or the next. The storm passed, replaced by clear, cold autumn nights. I started to relax, convincing myself it truly had been a grief-induced hallucination, a product of the storm and an overactive imagination steeped in loss. I started sleeping a bit better, the sharp edges of Jasper's absence blurring just slightly into a duller ache. Then, about a week later, it happened again. This time, there was no storm. The night was perfectly still, cold and silent. The kind of silence where you can hear the hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the ticking of the clock on the bedside table. I was deeply asleep, lost in some mundane dream. Tap, scratch, tap. It came from the bedroom door, unmistakable, clear as a bell in the profound quiet. I bolted upright in bed, heart instantly hammering against my ribs. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't faint this time. It was distinct, deliberate, right outside my door. Tap, scratch, tap, pause. Tap, scratch, tap. Every hair on my arm stood on end. This wasn't the wind. This wasn't the house settling. This wasn't a dream. This was real. And it was that sound. Jasper's sound. Panic began to bubble up, cold and sharp. My mind raced. What could it be? A mouse in the wall? No. The sound was too precise, too rhythmic, and definitely coming from the surface of the door, not inside the wall. An insect? Unlikely in late autumn, and definitely not capable of that specific noise. I sat frozen, listening. The sound stopped. Silence flooded back in, heavy, oppressive. Minutes ticked by on the glowing clock face. 3:14 a.m. I held my breath, straining to hear anything else. A floorboard creaking downstairs, footsteps, anything. Nothing. Just the deafening silence and the frantic pounding of my own heart. Slowly, cautiously, I slid out of bed. My feet made no sound on the thick rug. The bedroom door was about 10 feet away, across the dark room. It was closed, but not latched. I'd left it slightly ajar, as always. I crept towards it, muscles tense, every nerve ending screaming. My hand reached for the doorknob, cold metal under my trembling fingers. I took a deep breath and pulled the door open quickly, peering out into the dimly lit hallway. Empty, silent, still. The hallway stretched away towards the stairs, shadows pooling in the corners. The doors to the other empty bedrooms were closed. Nothing moved, nothing stirred. Just the faint moonlight filtering through the landing window, painting pale rectangles on the worn wooden floor. I stood there for a long time, listening, feeling incredibly vulnerable in my thin pajamas. The air in the hallway felt cold, colder than it should have. I checked the locks on the front and back doors downstairs earlier. I knew I had. Routine. But doubt gnawed at me now. Had I forgotten? Could someone be in the house? But the sound wasn't someone trying to break in. It wasn't heavy or forceful. It was small, specific, personal. It was Jasper's signature knock. Shivering, more from fear than cold now, I retreated back into my bedroom, closing the door firmly this time, clicking the lock into place. The sound felt loud, final in the stillness. I leaned against the door, breathing heavily, trying to regain control. Locking the door felt safer somehow, but also trapped me. If the sound started again, on this side, I shuddered, pushing the thought away. I didn't sleep for the rest of that night. I sat huddled in bed, lights on, straining my ears at every tiny sound, jumping at every creak. My rational mind battled with the primal fear. Grief hallucination? Auditory pareidolia? Finding patterns in random noise? It had to be something logical. But the clarity of the sound, the perfect mimicry, it felt intentional. It felt like something new. Knew Jasper, knew his habits, knew me. And that thought was far more terrifying than any simple haunting. It implied intelligence, awareness, and a deeply unsettling intimacy. The tapping didn't happen every night. That was almost worse. It became unpredictable. Sometimes I'd go 4 or 5 nights with blessed silence, starting to believe it was over, that my mind had finally settled. Then, just as I started to relax, started to sleep deeply again. Tap, scratch, tap. Sometimes it was at the door. Sometimes, chillingly, it seemed to come from the window overlooking the dark backyard. Tick, scrape, tick. Always faint at first, then growing slightly louder, more insistent if I didn't react. Always Jasper's exact rhythm, always stopping the moment I made a move to investigate. Always leaving behind nothing but silence and a residue of cold fear. My life began to revolve around it. Sleep became a precious, elusive commodity. I started leaving lights on throughout the house at night. I bought a white noise machine, hoping to drown out the silence and any potential sounds. But it just made me feel more isolated, straining to hear through the artificial hiss. I considered getting another cat, but the thought felt like a betrayal, and also, horrifyingly, like offering whatever this was another sound to mimic. I started looking at the door, the window, with suspicion, with dread. The wood grain seemed to hold shadows. The glass reflected distorted shapes in the dim light. My own familiar home, the place that was supposed to be my sanctuary, began to feel alien, watchful. I thought about telling someone, my sister, a friend, but how could I explain it without sounding completely unhinged? Hey, I think my dead cat's ghost is politely scratching at my door, except I don't really believe in ghosts. So maybe it's something else, pretending to be my dead cat? Yeah, that would go over well. They'd offer sympathy, suggest grief counseling, maybe gently hint I wasn't coping well with being alone. And maybe they'd be right. The uncertainty was corrosive. Was I losing my mind? Was intense grief capable of creating such specific, recurring auditory hallucinations? I found myself talking to Jasper's urn sometimes, whispering into the quiet house. Is that you, buddy? Are you trying to tell me something? Or am I just going crazy? The silence offered no answers. One night, about a month after the second incident, I decided I couldn't live like this anymore. The constant tension, the lack of sleep, the gnawing fear and self-doubt were wearing me down. I decided to stay awake, wait for it, and confront it. Not by opening the door, but by acknowledging it, challenging it. I made coffee, strong and black, sat in the armchair in my bedroom, facing the door, a heavy book open in my lap, though I couldn't focus on the words. The hours crawled by. Midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. The house was utterly silent. My eyelids grew heavy, despite the caffeine. Doubt crept in again. Maybe tonight it wouldn't happen. Maybe it really was over. Then, at precisely 3:07 a.m., according to the clock I kept glancing at, it started. Tap, scratch, tap. Faint, hesitant almost, at the bottom corner of the locked bedroom door. My breath hitched. My knuckles whitened on the arms of the chair. I didn't move. Tap, scratch, tap. Pause. Tap, scratch, tap. A little louder now, more insistent. Just like Jasper when he really wanted in. My heart pounded. Adrenaline surged, pushing back the exhaustion. This was it. I took a deep, shaky breath. "Jasper?" I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. Silence. The tapping stopped instantly. Okay, not Jasper. I knew that. But saying the name felt like appeasement, testing the waters. I waited. A full minute passed. Nothing. Maybe acknowledging it was enough? Then it started again, but different. Not the polite tap. This was a frantic, desperate scratching. Scrape, scratch, scratch, scrape. Quick, urgent, like claws scrabbling for purchase, trying to get under the door. The sound was sharp, unnerving, completely unlike Jasper's usual gentle summons. It went on and on, a dry, rasping sound that set my teeth on edge. Fear turned to anger, fueled by exhaustion and frayed nerves. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice louder now, shaking but firm. "What do you want? Stop it!" The frantic scratching stopped abruptly, mid-scrape. The sudden silence was shocking, absolute. I held my breath, listening so hard my ears hurt. And then I heard it. It wasn't loud. It was barely audible, right on the other side of the door. A soft, dry sound, like dead leaves rustling. No, like a chuckle. A low, guttural, dry chuckle. It lasted only a second, maybe two. Then nothing. Absolute, profound silence. A silence that felt heavier, colder, more menacing than anything that had come before. I didn't move from that chair until the first gray light of dawn seeped through the window. The chuckle echoed in my mind, replaying itself. Each repetition colder, more terrifying than the last. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something else. Something amused. Something that had been toying with me, using the memory of my beloved pet as its hook. The tapping, the scratching, never happened again after that night. Not once. But the silence it left behind isn't peaceful. The house still feels wrong sometimes, especially late at night. I often sleep with the lights on. I double-check locks compulsively. I still sometimes catch myself listening for Jasper, but now the listening is tinged with a deep-seated fear. I never found out what it was. I don't want to know. Some doors are better left unopened. Some sounds better left unidentified. But the mimicry, that's what haunts me. The fact that something, somewhere, knew that specific sound, that tap, scratch, tap, knew it would get my attention, knew it would twist the knife of grief while simultaneously planting the seeds of terror. It wasn't just a random haunting. It felt targeted, personal, a violation not just of my home, but of my memory, my love for my lost companion. So now, when the house is quiet in the dead of night, I listen, and I pray that the only sounds I hear are the ordinary ones, the explainable ones. Because the thought of hearing that familiar little tap again, knowing what might be making it, that's a horror that chills me far deeper than any ghost story ever could. It's the creepy truth of the midnight mimic. Okay, gather close. We are going deeper into the night now, into that specific hour when the world outside goes utterly still, and the only sounds are the ones inside your own head, or the ones that shouldn't be there at all. This isn't about things you see. It's about things you hear, things that crawl into your ear in the dead silence and make a nest of ice in your soul. My name is Sarah, and this happened about 5 years ago. I was living in this slightly rundown but charmingly old apartment building on the edge of the city. Think high ceilings, drafty windows, floors that groaned underfoot. Character, right? But mostly it was quiet, especially at night. The street noise died down after 11, and by 2 a.m., the silence was profound, almost thick. I'd just gone through a messy breakup and was navigating that weird landscape of sudden solitude. Nights were the hardest. Too much time to think. Too much quiet to fill. One thing about this old apartment was that it still had a working landline jack. I didn't actually have landline service. Who does anymore? But the physical phone, a clunky beige model left by a previous tenant, sat on a little table in the hallway just outside my bedroom. It was unplugged from the wall jack, just sitting there like a dusty relic. I kept meaning to get rid of it, but never got around to it. It was just part of the furniture. So imagine this. It's a Wednesday night, deep into November. Cold air rattling the old window frames slightly. I'm dead asleep, probably around 3 a.m., that particular hour when sleep is deepest, when the world feels furthest away. Complete silence, apart from the low hum of the ancient refrigerator in the kitchen down the hall. Then the salad rips through the quiet. Ring! Loud, jarring, the unmistakable, almost forgotten sound of an old-fashioned telephone ringer. Not my cell phone's polite chime. This was the strident, demanding bell of the beige landline phone in the hall. My eyes flew open. My heart slammed against my ribs, shock instantly dissolving the fog of sleep. The ringing cut off abruptly after that single piercing burst. Silence crashed back in, seeming even heavier now. My first thought was sheer confusion. The landline? But it's not plugged in. I knew it wasn't. I'd specifically unplugged it months ago when I first moved in, tucking the cord behind the little table. There was no service connected to the jack anyway. It couldn't ring. Maybe I dreamt it? A sleep-addled brain conjuring phantom sounds? It's been incredibly vivid, though. That specific, metallic shrill of the bell. I lay there frozen, listening intently. Nothing. Just the faint hum of the fridge, the whisper of wind outside. My heart gradually slowed, but the adrenaline left me wide awake, nerves jangling. Okay, must have been a dream. A really loud, realistic dream. Annoying, but explainable. I punched my pillow, rolled over, and tried to force myself back to sleep, focusing on my breathing. Just as my muscles started to relax, just as the edge of sleep began to creep back. Ring! Same sound, same abrupt single ring, same source, the hallway. This time, there was no denying it. I sat bolt upright, throwing the covers off, goosebumps erupting all over my skin, despite the warmth of the duvet. Okay, not a dream. The unplugged landline phone just rang. Twice. Panic started to prickle at the edges of my mind. How? Why? Was there some weird electrical surge? Some bizarre short circuit in the building's ancient wiring that could make a disconnected phone ring? It seemed wildly improbable. My feet hit the cold wooden floor. Every nerve felt hyper alert. I crept out of my bedroom doorway, peering down the dark hallway towards the little table where the phone sat. Moonlight from the living room window cast long, distorted shadows. The phone itself was just a pale shape in the gloom. Silent. Mockingly silent. Should I check it? Should I plug it in? The thought seemed insane, inviting trouble. But the mystery was clawing at me. What if it rang again? What if someone was genuinely trying to reach, well, whoever used to live here? Or what if it was some kind of warning? My mind, fueled by late-night fear, started spinning wild scenarios. Hesitantly, I tiptoed down the hall. Reaching the table, I knelt down, fumbling behind it in the dark for the phone cord. Found it. My fingers traced the smooth plastic of the plug. Then, feeling slightly ridiculous but compelled by a need to know, I reached for the wall jack and plugged it in. It clicked softly into place. I stood up, staring at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. Nothing happened. It just sat there, inert, beige, slightly dusty. Okay, maybe plugging it in reset whatever weird electrical glitch had caused the phantom rings. Maybe now it would stay silent. Feeling a little calmer, though still deeply unsettled, I started back towards my bedroom. I was halfway there when it happened. Ring! Ring! This time it didn't stop after one ring. It kept going, the shrill, insistent bell echoing relentlessly through the quiet apartment. Ring, ring, ring. My blood ran cold. It was plugged in now. This was real. Someone or something was calling this disconnected line at 3 a.m. My hand hovered over the receiver. Should I answer it? Every horror movie trope screamed, "No! Don't answer the creepy midnight phone call." But morbid curiosity and a tiny, irrational sliver of hope that there might be a logical explanation, a frantic wrong number, a misrouted emergency call, won out. My hand trembled as I lifted the receiver. The ringing stopped instantly. I pressed the cool plastic to my ear, holding my breath. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The line wasn't dead, but it wasn't a dial tone either. It was filled with noise. Thick, churning static, like a radio tuned between stations, but deeper, harsher. Beneath the static, almost buried by it, were other sounds. Faint, rapid clicking, like insects skittering over metal. A low, intermittent hum that seemed to vibrate right through the receiver into my skull. And whispering. Not clear words, just the sensation of whispering. Multiple voices, overlapping, distorted, speaking in wet, sibilant hisses, just below the threshold of intelligibility. Sometimes a sound would almost resolve into a word, a familiar phoneme, before dissolving back into the chaotic noise. It felt ancient and incredibly cold. Not physically cold, but emotionally cold, devoid of any warmth, any humanity. Like listening to the heat death of the universe through a broken telephone line. "Hello?" I tried again, louder this time. "Who is this? What do you want?" The static seemed to surge in response, growing louder, harsher, The clicking intensified. The whispering became a frantic, layered babble, still utterly incomprehensible, but filled with a palpable sense of distress, malice. I couldn't tell. It just felt profoundly wrong, unhealthy, like listening to something decaying, something unraveling. A wave of pure dread washed over me. This wasn't a wrong number. This wasn't a technical fault. This was something else. I slammed the receiver back into its cradle, my hand shaking violently. The connection cut off, plunging the hallway back into silence. But the silence wasn't comforting anymore. It felt heavy, charged, contaminated by the sounds I just heard. I stood frozen for a moment, heart pounding, the echo of the static and whispers seeming to linger in the air. Then, I ripped the phone cord out of the wall jack with a violence that surprised me. I didn't just unplug it, I yanked it free, the plastic plug scraping against the socket. I picked up the phone itself, carried it into the kitchen as if it were contaminated, and dumped it unceremoniously into the trash can, burying it under some junk mail. Out of sight, out of mind. Or so I hoped. Getting back to sleep was impossible. I spent the rest of the night huddled on my sofa, lights blazing, jumping at every creak and groan of the old building. The sounds from the phone replayed in my head. The layered static, the clicking, the cold, wet whispers that almost formed words. What was it? Interference from some powerful radio source? Crosstalk from ancient, decaying phone lines? Or something else? Something deliberately reaching out, using this forgotten connection point. And why 3:07 a.m.? Why that specific time, twice? The next day, exhausted and jumpy, I called the building superintendent, Mr. Henderson, a gruff but decent old guy. I hesitantly explained what had happened. The phantom rings from the disconnected phone, plugging it in, the bizarre static call. I expected him to laugh or dismiss it. He didn't laugh. He got quiet, rubbed his chin thoughtfully. That phone line. Yeah, it ain't been active in years. Not since old Mrs. Gable lived here. Maybe 10, 15 years back. He paused. She passed away in this apartment, in her sleep. Found her a few days later when the neighbors got worried. My blood turned to ice. Did she pass away around 3 a.m? The question felt ridiculous, morbid, but I had to ask. Mr. Henderson shrugged. Don't know the exact time, love. Coroner just said sometime overnight. Why? I mumbled something about just wondering, feeling suddenly cold despite the daylight streaming through the window. Knowing the apartment's history didn't explain the call, but it added a thick layer of unsettling context. Was it Mrs. Gable trying to, what, communicate? Or was something else using the tragedy, the lingering energy, as a conduit? Life had to go on. I tried to put the incident out of my mind. I got rid of the trash with the phone in it, quickly. I double-checked that the wall jack was empty. Weeks passed. No more phantom rings. No more strange calls in the dead of night. The intense fear began to fade, replaced by a low-level hum of anxiety, a lingering question mark. I started sleeping through the night again, mostly. But the experience changed things. I never felt entirely comfortable in that apartment afterwards. The silence at night no longer felt peaceful. It felt expectant. I found myself subconsciously tensing up as 3 a.m. approached. I avoided walking down the hallway in the dark if I could help it. The space where the little table and the beige phone used to sit felt bare, noticeable. And sometimes, very rarely, usually when I'm overtired or stressed, I'll be drifting off to sleep, and in that quiet space between waking and dreaming, I'll hear it. Not the phone ringing, something subtler. A faint crackle like static electricity. And beneath it, almost imagined the sensation of those cold, wet whispers just at the edge of hearing. It snaps me awake instantly, heart pounding, straining my ears in the darkness. It's never there when I'm fully awake. Just a phantom echo, a memory resurfacing, or a reminder that whatever reached out through that dead phone line might still be listening, waiting. I moved out of that apartment about a year later. Found a newer place, brighter, less character maybe, but definitely fewer drafts, and crucially, no ancient, unplugged landlines sitting around. But I never forgot the 3:07 a.m. call. The sheer wrongness of it. The way it violated the sanctity of silence, the safety of my own home, using a mundane object as its gateway. It taught me that sometimes the most terrifying things aren't the monsters you can see. They're the formless anxieties that creep in through the cracks in reality. The whispers in the static. The unanswered calls from the abyss that leave you wondering, long after you hang up, who or what was really on the other end of the line, and why they chose to call you in the dead of night.